In this video, I'm going to show you how to turn your ideas into a webtoon by sharing all of the production tips before you start publishing. Just trust me, bro. For those that are new here, I am a webtoon artist. I definitely don't get paid for it, but I specialize in action comics that nobody reads. But believe it or not, I do enjoy drawing comics so much that I have 4 titles currently published on the Webtoon platform. A lot of them were one-shot, but my ongoing series is Savory Fair. I'm not gonna lie, most of the process of creating a webtoon is fairly tedious on the brain, but I promise it is fun once you get a good handle of the process. On to the meat and potatoes. While I am not an official contracted Webtoons original creator, I am a regular Webtoon canvas creator, which is the artist that posts on the platform for free. Most comic ideas get abandoned due to a lack of planning or hitting a wall with the writing, so I will help you get your stories out there. I hope I am able to simplify this overwhelming process so that you can focus on bringing your stories to life. Just to clarify, this won't be a drawing tutorial, but more of a focus on planning and pre-production. I will outline what's needed before you upload your very first episode so that you can focus on the drawing aspect. When I say webtoon, I'm not exclusively talking about the big green platform that I'm sure you're familiar with. I'm referring to the vertical scroll comics in general, but these pointers can still apply to the page-by-page webcomics and mangas as well, so buckle in. So where do you even begin? Most folks that aspire to create their webcomic generally start with their first original character. It's the one that can't leave them alone, and they end up doodling them in their school notes. That's the essence when it comes to developing a webtoon project. Most webcomic artists start off from a cast of characters they've daydreamed about and then build a story around them. Another way for an idea to develop is when you watch a movie and think, wow, I really love that enemies to lovers trope. I'm gonna write a story based on that. You get the point. You have to have your own tastes and preferences and stories, and you just have that itch to create your own spin of them. At this stage, you're just writing all of your ideas into a scratch notebook and you're just letting your imagination go wild. You could be collecting all of the reference concept art and the kind of world and the style you want to create for the story. I personally keep a journal where I jot down all of the little ideas that come into mind without even thinking how it can fit in. So focus on creating something that is fun for you and a concept that excites you, because if you don't enjoy creating your comic starting out, you definitely will not enjoy it when it becomes a job. Next is creating your logline and elevator pitch. When creating a story, it's easy to get carried away and lose direction or overwhelmed when you end up taking a very long break or give up because of decision paralysis. To start, you will need a logline. This is very important because creating a webtoon is half of the battle and the other half is convincing people to read your story. The logline, aka the summary, is what's seen when people are already on your webcomic website when people land on your page. This is when they decide if they want to start reading your first episode. This should not be so complicated that it's a whole paragraph that's hard to read through. This needs to be simple enough that is around 1 to 3 sentences. I would make sure it's constructed with the basic plot and then the mystery question to make the readers curious enough to want to pick up your story. I would think of it like a YouTube thumbnail. It's kind of about the packaging. At first glance, which video thumbnail would you click on more? The goal of the logline is to be able to hook readers in. The second version of your summary is the elevator pitch. Now this is the blurb you use to promote your comic on other social media platforms like Twitter, formerly Good, Blue Sky, and Instagram. This version of your blurb, you're going to need to dumb down your plot to the barest of bones. I put a lot of emphasis on both of these because you will have to introduce your story a lot to people. Elevator pitches would have familiar phrases to get the casual scrollers invested in your stories, like enemies to lovers, or found families, or gay priests. Try to find common tropes that describe your story to convince people that are otherwise not familiar with your work. When writing your stories, you want to make sure your plot stays somewhat true to your summary so that your readers are also getting what they signed up for. So to review, you should have a logline and an elevator pitch. The next step is to answer a couple of questions. So in this section, I will list out the general questions you'll need to answer before weaving your ideas into a story. Some of these can be tweaked a little depending on the genre of your comic, but this should be applicable to most story types. Of course, this is a no-brainer, but you should already have A, your title, and B, your genre. questions you'll need to answer before you start. Who are your characters? What are their goals and motivation? What are the obstacles keeping them from their goal? What happened before the start of the story? What is the backstory of each of your characters and how does that form their motivation? Who is supporting them towards their goals? What are their motivation? Who is against them and what are their motivation? What happens if your character does not achieve their goal? What happens if the character succeeds? And of course, what is the climax and ending of your story? This last one is important because every event that happened prior helps push the characters towards the climax. Whether that is the encounter with the final boss of your action series or your two main leads are finally getting together. I find it easier to work backwards to ensure the climax and the ending of the story feels like a satisfying payoff to the audience. The one thing that makes me happy as a writer is when readers tell me that the story feels planned out. So you are able to answer the most spiciest and burning questions about your story, and now it's time to get to work. And this next section will be about the working document. This part of the process is very prone to being overly chaotic and overwhelming, so my best advice before jumping into this section is to be patient with yourself. Creating a story that you will be proud of takes a lot of time, and it's best to be consistent and steady than overly ambitious and burning out. Plus, no need to worry, you already have the important information on hand from the previous section. So I usually work on 4 separate documents when drafting a story. Because of all of the chaos that is writing a draft, it's easy for notes to get lost in the mix. Personally, I get overwhelmed easily when a document is way too long and takes a lot of scrolling to review previous notes, so this is the system that works best for me. So the working documents I have are the brain dump, the outline, the real-time draft, and the clean, polished draft. The brain dump document is where I throw all of the ideas and references I potentially want to explore. It's relative to the saying of throwing meatballs at the wall and see what sticks. This is the free-for-all stage, but you're trying to organize everything to fit within the purpose of your story. I make sure to keep every idea in the document. Even if you have an idea that you end up editing out, I just put a strike through instead of deleting the whole section, just in case you want to add the idea back into the final draft. The key here is to make sure the setting, plot point, and character actions move the story along. Remember, you also have your logline to help keep you on track, so you will eventually get your ideas in order. I always have this document open when working on any of my drafts. The second document is the outline. This will help you organize the events of your stories that need to happen. The goal is to make sure you have a clear view to see if each story events are building their way to the climax and ending of your story. So each line of the outline does not have to be super specific, as they are listing what happened during each arc. For example, an outline can look like this. And continue this all the way until you reach this. I start with the big picture, so I write out at a very broad level what needs to happen in each section. Then I write out the event of each arc within the season, and from the arcs I vaguely write what needs to happen in each episode. Each event needs to push your story forward, and any stagnant arc may have your readers lose interest or feel like your story is dragging on. Another question you have to answer when including an arc is, how will this event affect your character and the story? Remember how I mentioned before that it's best if you already have a specific climax in mind so that everything that occurs in the story can build up properly to it? The same can be applied to the high moments of an arc, or even a season's finale. Having a strong scene or moment in mind for each arc and have your episode build up to it. Building goalposts in your plot gives your story a clear direction, and having a strong emotional scene at every arc can also be a lasting impression on your readers and keeps them returning for future episodes. The beauty of creating a webcomic independently is that you're not limited to an amount of episodes. Arcs can be as long as you need it to be. I've had an arc outlined for 10 episodes and it ended up being 18 episodes total. The third document is the real-time draft. I also call this the extraction part of the process. This is when you go through the brain dump document and take what makes sense to fill in the blanks of your outline. This is yet another draft because it's still too early to fully commit to an idea when you're still sorting out parts of the story. At this stage, I work on giving the story a treatment where you need to make sure all of the questions the readers may have about your stories are answered, clean up the plot holes, and make sure the character's actions match your motivation. I always work in drafts, and I always save every draft. I never delete anything in case I have an idea I want to revisit that was scrapped at some point. You also should not be afraid to write down bad ideas. The beauty about drafts is that you don't have to show anyone these. So please just let your drafts run and you can still edit at this stage. And finally, the fourth and last document, which is the final draft. This is where I commit to an idea or plot point from the working draft mentioned previously and create a clean, polished draft. Because I'm thinking about a million other things like drawing the webcomic episode, I need the final script to already have been edited, polished, and cleaned by the time I start producing the episode. You actually don't need to have this document completely done from beginning to end of the entire story. At the very least, have a few episodes polished in advance all ready to go. As you spend weeks and weeks working on your comic, your writing, editing, and scripting style will also grow with you. And sometimes you'll need to edit down or add on to an episode to fully develop a plot point. Sometimes you'll need to be receptive to your readers' feedback as well if they have any questions about the plot you haven't answered. That's why the final draft is done while the webtoon is already underway. However, I do try to finalize a script at least 5 episodes in advance so that you're still properly building up to each episode to the next. You can pull information from both the outline and working draft to put together an episode script while working on your webcomic in real time. And even with chapters written and polished in advance, a new idea can still come up. Sometimes even when you're midway of drawing an episode. The mentality is that your episode is still a draft until it is uploaded. This is just my system of writing that works for me and my ADHD brain. You should learn other writing systems from other creators and pick and choose whichever works for you. This is a marathon and not a sprint, so just be patient with yourself. And yay, it is finally time to work on that very first Webtoon episode. If you are still here, thank you so much for watching this video. I will create more Webtoon creation related videos in the future, so I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, bye.